Welcome to the Stressless Eating Podcast, where we help diet-obsessed and food-crazed women break themselves out of the food and body prison, end the dieting madness, and take control of their health for good. I'm your host, Leanne Ellington, and this podcast is about answering one question. How can you heal your relationship with food and your body and take a practical approach to this whole self-love journey, but without all that restriction, obsession, and shame, and without needing years of therapy just to do so? If you want to know the answer, you're in the right place. All this information is 100% free, so please subscribe to and review our podcast. All right, we are back for another episode of the Stressless Eating Podcast, and I'm so excited to welcome Laura-Lee Bryant back to the show. Hello.
Hi.
Yay.
So glad to be back.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to be talking about a topic today that a lot of women may have never ever heard of. It's called orthorexia. And, you know, everyone's heard about, I say everyone, but like it's pretty mainstream to hear topics about eating disorders such as, you know, bulimia, anorexia, stuff like that. Disordered eating is, we've done an episode on the podcast on that specifically, because again, you know, the diet mentality, people don't know that is a form of disordered eating, or it absolutely can be. But one thing that comes up all the time, and it's kind of masked under this air quotes word health, is this concept of orthorexia, right? And if you were to just kind of look at orthorexia in a simplified manner, what it is it's basically this like hyper intensive, unhealthy focus on eating in a healthy way. And I'm putting healthy in air quotes, right? And so like, you know, it's one of those things where, yes, we want to focus on fueling our bodies and having a really beautiful relationship with food and nutritiously dense foods and all of that. But if you get to it to a degree of obsession and like hypervigilance, it's actually really unhealthy, right? And so unlike a lot of, you know, just like other eating disorders, it does focus around food, but orthorexia revolves around the quality of food, not the quantity of it, right? And it really is heightened with terms like good, bad, right, wrong, should, shouldn't, healthy, unhealthy. So I'm super excited to have Laura-Lee to kind of talk us through this conversation as well. Because first of all, it's such an important topic that nobody's really talking about. And also, you know, you have your own experiences that I think will be really enlightening to be shared. I know I have mine. And then of course you are so deeply integrated in the health and wellness world, both online and offline, that it, again, there can be a dark side to this health world. So we want to just kind of shed light on this really important topic and also give women a safe space to know like they're not alone, because again, this is more prevalent than we think. So thanks for being back. And just, you know, anything before we dive in, anything that kind of comes to your mind. And then I'd love to just hear, if you don't mind, just sharing a little bit about your experiences with your own kind of like hypervigilance of the healthy foods and all that. And then we'll get into how that's extended outward into the health world and your career and all that. But if you don't mind just kind of filling us in a little bit on your experience of this.
Okay. So what comes to my mind first is that this is even more insidious in some ways than traditionally recognized eating disorders, because as you said, it is about the quality of food and it's harder to sort of quantify because of that. And there's a lot less conversation about it. And it can be, I don't want to say just as damaging. I mean, I'm not a medical professional, but it can be incredibly damaging. And it was for me. And it can be harder for friends and family to spot. It can be harder for you as the ailing person struggling with this to recognize. And so I'm just really glad we're shining a light on it for that reason. And for me, you know, that was very, very true. I was living in New York. This was back in from, I guess, 2008 to about 2012. And you know, food was the one thing I could control in my life. I felt out of control everywhere, but I masked that as a problem by choosing to go the route. I'm sure it was not sort of a conscious choice, but I think it was conscious in the sense that I knew on some level that if I was traditionally sort of anorexic, if I was traditionally, you know, skipping meals and not eating, people would recognize that. And I also knew that, I didn't want to go the route of bulimia. I'd seen that in friends that seemed messy and complicated. And it seemed like there was a lot of merit in choosing the health halo of orthorexia as something that would be easier to get away with. Yeah. So I think that, and then I also think I convinced myself that I was just being healthy. And so what that looked like for me, there was definitely restriction. I definitely was not consuming as many calories as I should have been, but it was more that I came up with my own arbitrary set of what it meant to be healthy. And then anything that was even slightly out of my rules for health made me feel guilty. It would incite binges. It would just turn, go into that shame spiral that you talk about a lot. But it was so silently deadly because it just showed up as, eating a lot of salads, making healthy choices. No, thanks. I don't want the junky Reese's. I'm going to have a homemade version or whatever.
Yeah. And I think you touched on so many important things. First of all, it's sneaky and insidious. We don't even know that it is a dangerous paradigm to be living in because we're being given these messages of like, oh, healthy means like no sugar, no this, no that. It's all of the things that you can't have, right? This is the elimination side of it. The restricting of like can't have, shouldn't have, not allowed, all of that side of it too. And then focusing on the hyper, like, again, we want to be healthy. We want to feed ourselves with nutritiously dense foods and really, focus on nourishing our bodies. But when it's obsessive, it can become very unhealthy. But there's this dark side of it because it's masked, just like you said, as health. When in reality, it's a form of control that is really like kind of covering up for something else that's going deeper on inside of our brain, our thoughts, our nervous system, our beliefs, our self-image. It's some sort of void that we're using some sort of coping mechanism. So a lot of times on this podcast, we talk about how binging and overeating and overconsuming is a coping mechanism, but control, restriction, dieting, hypervigilance about what you eat, it's also a coping mechanism. It's just an opposite side of the same spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. And it's sneaky and insidious because the world is actually validating this and complimenting you for your willpower. And I say you, as in anyone who's listening to this, that's relating to this. If you are showing up with these orthorexic kind of tendencies, in general, society is complimenting you for your willpower, telling you how strong and resilient and accountable you are, telling you like, oh my gosh, you're such a great example. I wish I could be like that. Right. And, it's kind of one of those things like a lot of the body positivity movement. And I agree is saying like, don't necessarily compliment somebody on their weight loss. Right. Because you don't know how they got it, right? Are they sick? Are they unhealthy? All those things. And in so many times in society, it's like, oh, you've lost weight. You look so great. Right. But a lot of times we can be actually reinforcing a negative habit, right? Or something that's actually like destructive. Right. And so the same is kind of true with this. We get reinforced by other people's perceptions of like, oh my gosh, she's so healthy. She's such an example. But then we also feel kind of trapped, right? Because I've never met a woman that struggles with orthorexia, and I deal with it time and time again with my clients, that I've never met a woman that struggles with it, that there isn't the other side of it, which is what happens when they can't possibly white knuckle and willpower their way through this any longer, that they have to go to some sort of opposite extreme. And it's usually an extreme, right? There's some sort of rebound, right? Yeah. And so, but again, society is complimenting this. So then they feel trapped in that set of shame, of the shame spiral, which is like, oh my gosh, everybody thinks I'm so healthy. If only they knew. And then it becomes our dirty little secret.
Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting because that is exactly both ends of it is what happened to me. I, quote unquote, used orthorexia to my advantage to be, traditionally very thin when I was living in New York. And I did get all of those compliments, especially living in that city. And but I was very unwell. And then what happened is after years of being orthorexic, and this is now several years into my career as a health food chef, I was still battling with orthorexia. the first 3 or 4 years. But what happened was I started to have a more difficult time fighting the cravings for whatever, but I fought against it. And so what I did instead was I would overdo it on my health foods. I had this health food arsenal, like granola was okay and almond butter was okay, but a slice of, Costco cake wasn't. So what I would do is just try to fill that void by eating like bowls and bowls of granola topped with organic peanut butter. And honestly, I gained weight eating. As an orthorexic person, I gained like 10 to 15 pounds in the last few years of that part of my life. And it was when I actually got divorced was the turning point for me, because all of a sudden I stopped living to eat and was just eating to live. And I just didn't care about the quality of the food, which sort of long-term is not something I would recommend, but short-term, actually, to go from feeling like a bagel and cream cheese was the worst breakfast to have to being like, sure, I don't care, whatever. Like, I just need fuel. Yeah. And I built this healthy relationship because it didn't hurt me and it didn't, make me unhealthy and it didn't ruin anything. And I actually ended up losing that 10 to 15 pounds 4 years ago after my divorce and haven't regained it because I let myself have the things that I want to have when I want them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's so much freedom that comes alongside it. And I'm sure there's a lot of women that are listening and that are like, oh my gosh, but like, if I don't control it, I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to go off the deep end. I'm going to gain a bunch of weight. And part of it is like, what I'm inviting women into is not like, because here's the thing. If that's the one thing that you're controlling your entire life, it's like, if somebody comes up to you and is like, hey, stop controlling the one thing you're trying to control. It's like, I'm not saying that, because it takes away all level of certainty and it actually creates anxiety and threat in our brain. If somebody's like, I want you to stop controlling the one thing you've been controlling your whole life, right? What I am inviting women into is learning a new paradigm to replace it. Right. But one built with structure and free, like structure as opposed to control, right? Because our brain does thrive on structure, but inviting them into a paradigm of freedom and permission and choice, as opposed to choice being taken away, and not all of a sudden just like reintroducing all of this stuff that you feel you've been deeming healthy or unhealthy your entire life. It's a gradual process, but part of it is, and we're going to talk about this when we get to actual steps to healing it, is first, the reason we're having this conversation is to create the awareness, because I've never met a woman that's going and out and gung ho about solving a problem that she doesn't even realize that she has. And if you think, and again, this is not to shame you, but a lot of women that might be listening to this think like, oh, my unhealthy obsession with being healthy is actually healthy. And that's a little bit of a mouthful, right? But the unhealthy obsession with being healthy, and all of these healthy words are really in air quotes, that's the biggest prison of them all. So thanks for sharing your version of it. I mean, for me, it was, I went from decades of not caring and not taking care of my body to all of a sudden being that hypervigilant. And what I noticed that came alongside the hypervigilance was not only judgment of myself when I, thought about eating something air quotes naughty, but I was judging everybody in my life. I was looking at people's, on the conveyor belt at the grocery store and judging the crap out of everything that they were buying. I was at restaurants thinking, oh my gosh, are they really going to use the whole dish or the whole little ramekin of salad dressing? Don't they know how much fat is in there? And I was up on my almighty horse. And I mean, shame for so many years wouldn't allow me to even talk about what I'm sharing right now, because again, it was so shameful. But I was becoming, along with the hypervigilance and the obsessiveness over my health, I was becoming a judgmental jerk to the people that I loved, because it wasn't personal to them. It was the way I was seeing myself. And I needed to rewire my brain and unbrainwash myself of that. Right. But again, first had to become the awareness of like, wow, what I'm thinking is healthy is actually super unhealthy.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I remember like getting really mad at my mom when I first moved home after culinary school, because she like didn't get a pasture raised chicken, and she was just doing her thing. And I just remember sitting in the car like berating her for it. And it's embarrassing to think back on, but it was just this place of intense fear and needing to have something figured out that other people didn't have figured out. And oh man, it really can take over your life. And I mean, one of the things I'm doing right now is writing my third cookbook, which I feel so compelled to do because I feel like it's actually really reflective for the first time of the healthy relationship that I have with food. Because looking back at my first few books, I was still really struggling with that. And yeah, no one wants to be the judgmental jerk, and it's like, our bodies are strong. That's the other thing. It's like our bodies can handle a lot. We have this idea, first of all, like one of the health food concepts of like detoxification, that certain foods like detox your body. Like, I mean, yes, sure. Like consuming fiber is, important to an extent to help you keep yourself regular. But this idea that like foods make us detoxify, no, our bodies are naturally detoxifying all the time. And so I think this idea that like something bad is going to happen, obviously barring specific allergies or conditions, diseases, like celiac disease or ulcerative colitis. I mean, for the most part, eating some potato chips and a Reese's is you can handle that just fine.
Yeah. Right. And that's the thing. A healthy nervous system can really handle anything. It's what happens is our nervous systems are nervous. And so all of a sudden we have these food sensitivities and intolerances and then we think like, oh, we have a gastrointestinal problem. But it's like, no, the gastrointestinal system, it's literally nicknamed the enteric nervous system. Its nickname is the second brain. It is literally dictated by your emotions and by your limbic system and how you're feeling moment to moment. And so a lot of the gastrointestinal distress that people are thinking is caused by, oh, I ate that Reese's cup. No, it's actually your thoughts about the Reese's cup that are causing your gastrointestinal system to be in distress. It's not the food, it's your thoughts about the food, and it just contributes further to the vicious cycle of the orthorexia.
Yeah. And that's why when you're young, it's not like it's not like your gastrointestinal system changes fundamentally from age 12 to age 22. But when you're 12, you eat, if you open up a sleeve of Oreos and you eat the entire sleeve at age 12, you're like, that tasted great. And guess what? You're probably not going to be interested in Oreos for a while, naturally. But at 22, where when I started this orthorexic journey at 22, I would eat the sleeve of Oreos and there was just this whole world of thoughts and meanings that I put to it in the moment. And then after for a very long time, and I was more likely to go for another sleeve of Oreos the next day or to punish myself and, not eat for a certain period of time.
Absolutely. It's really our beliefs that come alongside it that dictate our actions. Like behaviors always are always following our beliefs. Beliefs dictate our behaviors. And it's interesting, like even just the paradigm that you shared, like ladies, I'm telling you, the hypervigilance, the orthorexia, the obsession over your health, there is always an opposite spectrum. There's always a bounce back. And that is the number one cause of binging, ladies. So I know, it makes you feel in control, but the more you try to control it, the less in control or the more out of control you'll actually feel. And that's why it's super important. And that's why we're here today, just talking about it, shining a light on this topic that no one's really talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting, Leanne. I would be curious to know from your expertise, do you, in a certain context, would you recommend to someone who's been in an orthorexic place to give just sort of like, I know you love experiments, sort of experiment for a couple of weeks with just allowing yourself, hey, just a week, for this week, I'm just going to have what sounds good to me. And then I can go back to what I've been doing after a week or anything like that. Do you have any experiments like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the answer is yes. And, the first thing is like, what brain is running an experiment like that? So first and foremost, I always look at the strategy and then but it's got to be alongside the stories and the thinking, right? So the strategy might be X, right? That's the content, but what's the intent shaping it, right? The intent might be, okay, what can we do? What thoughts and beliefs do we need to overcome? And we get specific here. And this is specifically like some of the experimentation I do with my clients, like we're reverse engineering overcoming carb phobia. That's a big one. Reverse engineering overcoming fat phobia. That's a big one. Reverse engineering overcoming calorie phobia. That's a big one. Reverse engineering overcoming the binging cycle that comes alongside the hypervigilance, right? So there's specific experiments that we do reverse engineer, but part of it is like when it comes to this concept of listening to our bodies, right? That's where most women are shut down, tuned out, numbed out. They don't even know what that feels like or looks like because they've been paying so much attention to a calorie count, a carb count, a micronutrient count, something external to them that they have no idea what it's like to actually listen to their body. So part of it is like, we need to change their brain and teach them a new like system of thinking and their thoughts about food so that they actually know like, well, what is hunger? Am I hungry or am I just bored? Am I full or am I just trying to deprive and control and restrict, right? Am I hungry or am I just desiring something sweet? Like all these different distinctions, there's so many micro distinctions within it. And so part of it is like relearning your body and relearning like what is a want versus what is a need, relearning like what does my body actually need if I were to say, hey, just let my body eat what I need. So in answer to your question, absolutely. But that would come off the back of this new foundation of thought processes that, again, they're in our blind spot. We can't see that we can't see it. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't have a map for it in our brain. So we need to address the stories and the thinking. And then on top of that, then we place a new strategy. But yes, what you just said is absolutely right. But part of it is like learning, you know, because like I said, a lot of women are like, Leanne, if I can't listen to my body, I can't trust my body, I'll go off the deep end. It's like, well, with your current paradigm, yes. But in this new paradigm, you've never tried it in this new paradigm, you know?
Right. So, and that's a really good distinction. Yeah. That's a really good distinction. It's sort of like putting, you don't want to put, I'm not going to say, I guess weapon is a little strong, but it's a very powerful tool. So you want to put it in the hands of someone who.
Absolutely. No, you said it spot on. Like it really, because here's the thing, like tracking, counting, weighing, measuring can be an absolutely powerful tool if you have a healthy relationship with food. It can become a weapon of mass control and destruction if you have an unhealthy relationship with food. So I think your use of that word was spot on.
Yeah, it's like when you did, keto for a little while, and it was so powerful because you have such a healthy relationship with food that you were able to bring that into any sort of dietary lifestyle.
Yeah, it's funny. I hadn't thought about that in a while, but yeah, like maybe like 2 summers ago or so, I was just like, hey, I want to play around. Like supposedly it's good for inflammation. I haven't done keto since I had the diet mentality. I'm going to do a little experiment and see what keto is like, because again, I want to be able to speak to it to my clients from like a present day experience. And I did keto for like a week, and don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it. Like I loved eating bacon wrapped, turkey lettuce wraps with mayonnaise on them and stuff. No, I'm just kidding. Like it was fun. I enjoyed it. Like I didn't feel deprived. I was definitely using like a feast mentality, not a fast mentality. I was listening to my body. I had the freedom, but I came to you, I remember a few days later, I was like, I don't like this. It's not stressless because I'm like full, but I'm never satisfied. Energetically, I don't feel as good energy. I said, I just thrive on carbs.
Me too.
And I was like, the reason I don't want to do this is not because I'm not enjoying it, but it's not stressless, And so it was a great example of recency. Because again, I'm not the same version of myself I was the last time I did like a lower carb or keto. It was called Atkins the last time I tried it, but I wanted to see, and I was like, yep, nope, not for me. Carbs are my friend. You know what I mean? So again, it's not about the food. It's who we're being when we use it. Keto was used as a really cool tool of experimentation for me a couple of years ago versus a weapon of control and deprivation and restriction and eliminating entire food groups. So that being said, you are a lot more, I am way more in the kind of personal development, emotional health, mental health world. You are a lot more integrated in the health and wellness world. So can you kind of just peel back the curtain for us, share a little bit, how is this showing up in the health and wellness world? What are you seeing? I know you're a big stand and you're a big pattern interrupt in that world. And I know there's a lot of your friends are doing it great, but there's a lot of people that you're seeing out there. And we're not obviously here to bash anybody, name any names, anything like that. Everybody's here doing the best they can with what they got. And I'm sure they are too. But we're here to help people spot patterns, right? So what are you seeing in the health and wellness world that's kind of being guised as health and wellness, but you know it for what it is because you've been there and you've seen it. And it's really this kind of exemplifying orthorexia. What are some things that we can look out for? What are you seeing in the health and wellness world today?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so much that is problematic. I mean, first of all, if you hear anyone tell you that there is one way to do things and that health means X, Y, and Z, you should run for the hills. And I think that's an obvious way that orthorexia shows up. So I think those people genuinely believe that. Another way that it shows up is, as you said, carbs and fat and calorie counting tend to be, I would say, the top three fears that people have. And so a lot of health food crusaders will be like, oh, I ate all the almond butter, and I ate all the avocado, and like I ate all the sweet potatoes for all my carbs and whole, grain bread, and I don't count calories, but they would still never swap that almond butter for just like good old butter, or they wouldn't swap that whole grain bread for just like some good challah bread, or they wouldn't swap the sweet potato for some potato chips. And you can see through their lives that they show that they still have a paradigm of health that has a lot of rules. It's just that they have this, pretense that they're healthy, and they believe it because they are eating, fat and carbs, and they're not calorie counting, but they're definitely still not taking any Halloween candy out of their kids' baskets because that would probably make them feel shameful. Yeah. And I think also, what was it? Oh, shoot. I forgot. There was another one I was going to say if I think of it, but I mean, there's just a lot of that, a lot of proselytizing too.
Well, I was going to ask you, I remember, it's as you've been in the trajectory of like really stepping into your own health and expressing your voice in your cooking, in your cooking classes, in your cookbook, you're getting ready to, you're working on your third one as we speak. There was a lot of, you noticed like, the ingredients that I was using were like overly air quotes healthy and like kind of expensive when there wasn't a need for it. And it kind of isolated some people too on an ingredient level, right? Mm-hmm. So can you kind of share a little bit about how you've eased up on that and you've kind of met people where they are and like kind of what to look for in the recipe side of things too, when it comes to the, you know what I mean? Like healthy for the sake of just calling it healthy when it really doesn't make that big of a difference?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I think, at this point, the more time goes on, the longer I do this, the less I have any kind of real definition of health other than whatever happens to make you feel good on a particular day. And that can change from day to day. So there are some general themes that I can point out that seem to overarchingly help people feel their best. Like, eating some fruits and vegetables and getting some fiber and getting some fat and, some protein and some complex carbs here and there. I mean, there are some general rules, but really it's so based on bioindividuality. So instead of, and I have to say, after all these years, I don't see like massive health changes in people from switching everything over to organic and pasture raised and grass fed. You can still be healthy and buy like generic stuff, and you can still be healthy and just buy like regular old chicken. Sure, if you have the money for it, like you could find some science to back up, to back up anything. But I just, at this point, I don't talk about that. I don't say I say a pound of ground beef. I don't say it has to be a pound of pasture raised grass fed ground beef. And I also am happy to throw in the occasional canned and packaged food and snack on things that are, not considered real food and have whole milk, God forbid, instead of, cashew milk, and have, a croissant from my favorite pastry instead of trying to make like a gluten-free, grain-free, like paleo croissant. I just I mean, those, I really just am just very chill about it. And it all has evened itself out.
Yeah, absolutely. The theme here, ladies, is there's no extremism going on anymore, and that's one of the things about orthorexia, or that kind of tendency to be hyper vigilant about the quality of the ingredients that you're putting in your body. It is a form of extremism. It is a form of hypervigilance. It is a form of control, and control is the opposite of freedom. Not to mention, if loving a warm, flaky croissant is wrong, I don't want you to be right. Ladies, what is life like if everything that now don't get me wrong, if you have a gluten intolerance, if you have celiacs, like I get it, go gluten-free. I want you to have that, right? And I love that there's the availability of recipes that can keep things gluten-free. So we're not talking about stuff like that where women in populations that need specific things because of your health. But if it's about being on the healthy soapbox, and I mean that with so much love, there's a form of freedom that you're leaving on the table. And most likely that lack of freedom and that control and that like prison that you're in of rules and too much structure, it is probably taking in the opposite direction of health. Because anyone who, if we're going to talk about health here, to be honest, and I mean this with so much love too, anybody who's talking about health and not talking to you about how the nervous system is the sole dictator of your health, I would run far and run fast. Because again, if you could be eating this gluten-free, soy-free croissant in a bath of stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and epinephrine, and feeling and being in your sympathetic branch of your nervous system while you're eating it. And it's going to be dictated as, like, for lack of a better way of saying it, fattening. Because of the system of systems that is affected when you're in that sympathetic branch of your nervous system. And again, it's not about the croissant. It's your thoughts about the croissant that matter, right?
It's the tale of two cookies.
Amen. Amen. Again, we're not here to make anybody wrong or call anybody out in a like confrontational way. We're literally here to just shine a light on this subject matter that people are kind of evangelizing. You know what I mean? And making it like this almost a badge of honor that you've never had a gram of simple sugars, you know, and it's all good. Like, I think that's the other big thing. Like, all of the big thing that's not being seen in the micronutrient and macronutrient count of the foods that people are being, you know, super controlling about is the invisible judgment that's associated with it. Ladies, food doesn't have to be personal. Food does not have to be emotional, right? And when we assign these labels of good, bad, right, wrong, should, shouldn't, it is just one lump of judgment that doesn't have to be there. But then on the flip side, or in addition, I should say, if your self-worth and your self-esteem is dictated by how well you follow these rules, I hate to say it, but you're screwed because you're gonna cave. This type of restriction is the number one cause of binging. There's going to be an offshoot somewhere, right? And again, if your whole identity is made up of how, you know, much willpower you have or how much you're great about eating air quotes clean, you're going to be very disappointed in yourself. And that's why it's a really, I think it's a very misleading label to follow, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a losing game for sure. No, that's very well said.
Absolutely. Anything else that you want to just add on before we wrap up? I think we really hit this one home, you know?
No, I think we nailed it. Yeah. I mean, it's like I would just wrap it up with, you know, you don't have to start your day with lemon water to feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
There's actually no real science behind lemon water being this, like, I feel like lemon water has become sort of like the pinnacle of every what I eat in a day YouTube video starts with that, and avocado toast and
apple cider vinegar.
And apple cider vinegar. Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think this is really powerful. I'm excited to share this with my community and listen to it myself. And there's already a few people I want to specifically send this to. So I'm really glad we're talking about it.
Yeah. And ladies, just like every episode on this podcast, we are here to create awareness. And it's an awareness. It's the ability to have an awareness of something that you didn't even know you have the ability to have an awareness of, you know, and there is no judgment. There's no shame, but part of it is like, we need to name it. We need to name what it is so that we can call it out, be like, oh, that's shame. I know what it looks like. So I can influence how I show up when it shows up. Oh, that's fear. That's loneliness. This is orthorexia, right? We need to, and part of it is I want to eliminate the stigma from this. So if you are really relating to this, I just want you to know you're not alone. This is a conversation to show you like you've been bamboozled just like we have. There is multi-billion dollar industry, multiple industries that are throwing these terms at you to make you believe that you are only as good as the nutrients that you put in your body or the ability of control or the amount of willpower you have to not put in air quotes junk food or things that are naughty or bad for you or everything's in air quotes, right? Because this is the language that's being thrown at you. So I just want to let you know there's nothing wrong with you if you were made to believe that you are only as worthy as the amount of nutrients that you put in your body. And that if orthorexia has seeped into your consciousness, because it happened to me, it happened to Laura Lee, and you would be shocked by the millions and millions and millions of women that are out there that are experiencing the same thing, but they don't have a name for it and they keep it. It's their little dark secret and nobody knows. And that's why we're here to shine this light and let you know you are not alone. You don't have to walk through this alone. And that's exactly why we're here shining a light on this really powerful topic.
I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here to shine the light on this topic, Laura Lee. We appreciate you ladies listening and we will talk to you on the next episode. Bye. Thanks for tuning into today's show. If you like what you heard and you're interested in breaking out of your own food, body, and diet prison, here's what I want you to do next. Head on over to stresslesseating.com. That's stresslesseating.com. And sign up to watch the Stressless Eating webinar, where I'll walk you through the exact 5-step game plan my female clients use to conquer emotional eating, self-sabotage, and finally heal themselves from the restrictive all-or-nothing diet mentality for good. But without obsessing or spending years in therapy to address it. I've laid it all out there for you in 5 easy steps. Remember, healing your relationship with food and your body does not happen by itself. You need expert guidance to make it happen, and we've helped clients all over the world take back their power from the food and find true and lasting freedom while enjoying life and warm chocolate chip cookies along the way. To see if we can help you do the same, head on over to stresslesseating.com. I'm Leanne Ellington, and I'll see you next time.